The music stopped. 200 guests froze. My daughter walked down the aisle, not to her groom, but to me, trembling, clutching a note. "Dad, read this before anything happens." My heart slammed as I unfolded it. The first line made my blood run cold. "You always told me silence can be as dangerous as lies." What she revealed next could destroy a wedding, and everything I thought I knew. During her wedding ceremony, my daughter pulled a note from her bouquet and handed it to me. "Dad, welcome back my beautiful family and friends. If this story resonated with you, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The music stopped. Not faded. Not softened. Stopped. 1 second, violins floated through the chapel like breath. The next, silence slammed down so hard I could hear my own heart misfire. My daughter stood at the altar in white. And instead of saying "I do," she turned toward me. Toward me. Her hands were shaking. I noticed that first. Not the guests shifting in their seats, not the priest frozen mid-breath, not even the groom's confused smile cracking at the edges. I noticed my daughter's fingers trembling as she reached into her bouquet. Slow. Deliberate. She slid something out from between the roses. A folded note. She didn't read it. She walked. Each step down the aisle echoed like a verdict. The dress whispered against the floor. Her eyes never left mine. They weren't angry. They were resolved. When she reached me, she pressed the note into my palm. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the room sharper than any scream. "Dad, please read this. Before anything else happens." Every eye turned to me. 200 guests. Family. Friends. Cameras raised. Phones glowing. A life paused mid-breath. My daughter stepped back. And suddenly I was standing alone in a packed chapel, holding a note that felt heavier than her entire childhood. My hands wouldn't move. I didn't open it. Because somewhere deep in my chest, a quiet voice I'd been ignoring for years finally spoke. "This wedding isn't about love." The paper trembled between my fingers. I looked up at her. She nodded once. Just once. "Read it." I unfolded the note. The first line stared back at me like an accusation. "Dad, if you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage you taught me to have." My throat closed. I could feel memories colliding, scraped knees, late-night homework, the first time I let go of her bike and watched her ride without me. Courage. She always said I was the bravest man she knew. The next line shattered something inside me. "I couldn't do this without telling you the truth. Because you deserve to know who you're really giving me away to." A murmur rippled through the room. I felt it before I heard it, the instinctive shift when people sense something is wrong but don't yet know how wrong. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might pass out right there in the pew. I skimmed ahead. Big mistake. Names jumped off the page. Dates. A place I recognized instantly. My breath caught. No. No, no, no. I forced myself back to the next line. "You always told me that silence can be as dangerous as lies. Today, I'm choosing not to be silent." The groom laughed nervously behind her. A soft chuckle meant to ease tension. It didn't. It made it worse. Because I suddenly remembered another laugh. Years ago. Same tone. Same forced brightness. A laugh I'd trusted. The chapel felt too small. My pulse roared in my ears as the truth began to circle. Still blurry, still unconfirmed, but close enough to burn. I looked at my daughter again. She wasn't crying. She wasn't scared. She looked like someone who had already survived the worst part and was finally ready to tell the story. I swallowed and kept reading. "Dad, the man standing at the altar with me knows you. He knows our family. And he knows exactly why this note had to reach you before I say anything else." A few guests turned toward the groom. He shifted his weight. Adjusted his tie. Smiled again. Tighter this time. I felt something ancient and protective rise inside me. The same instinct that used to wake me in the middle of the night when she had a fever. The same one that told me when a scraped knee was worse than she admitted. This wasn't just a wedding interruption. This was a warning. My vision blurred as I reached the last visible line. What I'm about to do next will change everything. but I need you to remember something before it happens." My hand shook harder now. I could feel the entire room leaning forward, hanging on a moment that was never meant to be public. And suddenly I understood why she gave the note to me. Not her mother. Not the priest. Not even herself. Me. Because whatever this truth was, she trusted me to carry it first. Before I could read the next line, my chest tightened so painfully I had to pause. I pressed the paper to my heart. And for a brief, terrifying second, I wondered, what would you do if the person you trusted most handed you a truth that could destroy everything you thought you knew? Take a moment and think about that. Because once I finished reading that note, there was no turning back. Not for her. Not for him. And not for me. Before that moment, before the chapel fell silent and my daughter placed a truth grenade in my hands, my life was simple in the way only routine can be. Predictable. Earned. Quiet. I was just a father giving his daughter away. That's what I thought. For 32 years, my world had revolved around one girl with scraped knees and stubborn eyes. Her name was Elena. I raised her mostly alone after her mother passed when Elena was 10. Cancer doesn't ask permission. It just takes. And when it did, Elena and I learned how to survive together. Two grieving people pretending to be stronger than we felt. I became the dependable one. The calm one. The man who fixed broken sinks, showed up early, stayed late, and never missed a school recital no matter how tired he was. I taught her how to drive in an empty mall parking lot. How to stand up for herself. How to look people in the eye when something felt wrong, even if she couldn't explain why. Especially then. Trust your instincts, I used to tell her. They whisper before they scream. Elena grew into a woman who listened to whispers. Which is why, when she introduced me to Daniel, I paid attention. He was charming in the socially acceptable way. Polite. Well-dressed. The kind of man who shook your hand firmly and looked you straight in the eye. He worked in real estate development, ambitious, connected, always talking about the future like it was something he already owned. He said all the right things. He laughed at my jokes. Called me sir even when I told him not to. Brought wine to dinner and flowers to Elena's grandmother. Everyone loved him. Everyone except the part of me that couldn't explain the unease that crept in whenever he smiled just a second too late. But I ignored it. Because fathers are supposed to let go. Because grief teaches you not to be suspicious of happiness when it finally arrives. Because Elena looked at him like she had once looked at the ocean, awed, hopeful, certain it held answers she needed. When Daniel proposed, she cried. Happy tears, she said. I hugged her and told her how proud I was. And I meant it. The months leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of fittings, tastings, guest lists, and family arguments about seating arrangements. Elena was radiant. Focused. Calm in a way I hadn't seen since before her mother died. There were moments, though. Little ones. Times when she went quiet mid-conversation. When her smile faded too quickly. When she stared at her phone like it had betrayed her. Once, I asked her if she was okay. She smiled and said, "Just wedding nerves, Dad." I believed her. Because believing your child is sometimes easier than admitting you might be wrong. Daniel, on the other hand, grew more confident as the day approached. More relaxed. Almost relieved. Like someone nearing the end of a long negotiation. The night before the wedding, he pulled me aside. I just want you to know, he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. I'll take good care of her. I promise. I looked into his eyes. And for the briefest second, I thought I saw something flicker there. Not love. Calculation. It vanished quickly, replaced by a smile, and I told myself I was imagining things. Old instincts misfiring. A father struggling to let go. The morning of the wedding, Elena hugged me longer than usual. Her arms were tight. Her breath uneven. Thank you for everything, she whispered. I laughed softly. You make it sound like a goodbye. She pulled back, looked at me carefully, and said, In a way, it is. I didn't understand then. I thought she meant childhood. I thought she meant independence. I didn't know she meant illusion. Now, standing in that chapel with her note burning through my hands, every ignored instinct came rushing back. Every whisper I told myself to dismiss. Every moment I chose peace over truth. And suddenly I wondered. How many signs do we miss because the truth threatens the happiness we want to protect? If you've ever trusted someone because it felt easier than questioning them, pause here. Ask yourself, would you rather protect peace or protect the people you love? Because Elena had made her choice. And whatever she was about to do next, she had been preparing for it long before she ever put on that dress. When you're ready, tell me to continue, and I'll take you to the moment that forced her hand. The line that finally broke me was written in ink so steady it felt rehearsed. Dad, 3 weeks ago, I found something I wasn't supposed to see. My heart sank. The chapel no longer felt like a holy place. It felt like a courtroom, polished wood, quiet judgment, and a truth waiting to be sworn in. I kept reading. I wasn't looking for proof. I wasn't suspicious. I was just trying to surprise him. Surprise him. That word twisted inside me. She went on. Daniel left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. I only meant to check the delivery date for the honeymoon tickets. But then a message popped up. I remembered that kitchen. Helped renovate it myself. Watched Elena dance barefoot across those tiles while music played too loud. A place of safety. And now, the message wasn't from a friend. Or a client. It was from a woman who knew his secrets. My jaw tightened. Around us, guests shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. A phone vibrated and was quickly silenced. The priest took a cautious step back, sensing something sacred was unraveling. I read on. She called him by a name I've never heard anyone use. And she thanked him for keeping his promise. Promise. That word again. I glanced up at Daniel. He was no longer smiling. His face had gone pale, eyes locked on Elena like he was trying to silently negotiate his way out of something already lost. Elena's gaze never left mine. She had trusted me with this first for a reason. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. That sounded like her. My daughter had always been quiet when she was hurt. Observant. Dangerous in her calm. Instead, I started paying attention. The paper felt slick in my hands. I checked dates. Crossed names. Followed patterns. Dad, you taught me how to notice when something doesn't add up. My chest ached. I had taught her that. I had also taught her to forgive. To believe. To give people the benefit of the doubt. And now I wondered if those lessons had almost cost her everything. What I found wasn't just betrayal, the note continued. It was a lie that began long before me. A cold realization crawled up my spine. Long before her. My breath came shallow as I read the next sentence. Daniel didn't just choose me. He chose this wedding because of you. I stopped. The words blurred. Because suddenly this wasn't just her story. It was mine. The room seemed to tilt as memories slammed together. Faces from years ago, business deals I'd walked away from, a project that collapsed under mysterious circumstances, a man who smiled politely while shaking my hand and then vanished from my life. A man named Daniel. My fingers clenched the paper so hard it crinkled. He knew who you were, Dad. He knew what you lost. And he knew exactly how close he needed to get to hurt you. A low murmur spread through the chapel now, like wind before a storm. Someone whispered, "What's happening?" Someone else said my name. But I couldn't look away from the note. Because suddenly I remembered why Daniel's laugh had sounded familiar. Why his confidence felt rehearsed. Why his relief as the wedding approached had never felt like love. This wasn't coincidence. This was strategy. I didn't know how to stop it, Elena wrote. Until I realized the only way to expose the truth was to bring it into the light where he felt safest. The altar. The vows. The witnesses. The room gasped as Elena finally turned, slowly, to face Daniel. "I'm sorry," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, her voice steady, unbroken. "But I won't marry a lie." Daniel stepped forward instinctively. "Elena, please, this isn't the place," he said, forcing a laugh that fooled no one now. "We can talk about this privately." Privately. The word dripped with irony. She shook her head. "No," she said softly. "This is exactly the place." I looked down at the final lines on the page. "Dad, whatever happens next, I need you to know this." My throat tightened. I didn't do this to embarrass him. I did this to protect us. And because the truth you buried years ago, is the same one he thought I'd never uncover. My knees nearly gave out, because I knew, without reading another word, that whatever secret Daniel had come for, it was tied to a choice I'd made long ago. A silence. A compromise. A truth I convinced myself no longer mattered. Elena met my eyes again. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. She wasn't asking for permission. She was asking for courage. Before this went any further, ask yourself, if your child uncovered a truth connected to your past, would you be strong enough to face it in front of the world? Because in the next moment, Elena spoke a single sentence that forced the past to step out of hiding. And nothing would ever be the same again. Elena, Daniel said again, this time dropping the laugh entirely. His voice sharpened. You're confused. You don't understand what you're doing. She tilted her head slightly, studying him the way she used to study broken clocks as a child, quietly, patiently, already knowing where the fault lay. Oh, I understand, she replied. More than you think. A ripple of whispers swept through the chapel. The priest cleared his throat but said nothing. This ceremony was no longer his to control. My fingers still clutched the note, but I didn't need it anymore. The words had already carved themselves into me. Elena took a slow breath and continued, projecting her voice now. 3 weeks ago, after I saw that message, I started asking questions. Not out loud. Online. Public records. Old articles. Company filings. Daniel's jaw tightened. I found your name in places you never mentioned, she said. I found connections you pretended didn't exist. And then I found something else. She turned slightly, just enough, for the guests to see her face clearly. You didn't just work in development, Daniel. You worked for a firm that collapsed after an investigation. A firm that ruined lives. My chest tightened, because now I knew exactly which firm she meant. Years ago, I'd been a project manager for a construction consortium. We were rushed. Corners were cut. When I raised concerns, I was told to stay quiet or walk away. I chose to walk. But not before signing papers. Not before agreeing to silence. The firm collapsed months later. Lawsuits. Bankruptcies. A whistleblower who was never protected the way he should have been. A man named Thomas Reed. Daniel's real last name. Elena went on. You changed your name after the investigation, she said calmly. Moved cities. Rebuilt your image. And then you found me. Daniel finally snapped. This is insane, he said sharply. You're twisting things to fit a story. Ask your father, he knows how complicated those situations were. Every eye swung toward me. My heart slammed against my ribs. Complicated. That was the word I'd used back then too. Elena turned to me, not accusing, not angry, just honest. He does, she said. And that's why I need him to hear this. She reached into the bouquet again. This time, she pulled out her phone. I recorded our conversation, she said, looking at Daniel. The one where I pretended I didn't know anything. The one where you finally stopped pretending. Gasps erupted. Daniel lunged forward instinctively, then stopped himself as 2 groomsmen stepped between them. Don't, he warned, low and furious. You have no idea what you're starting. Elena met his glare without flinching. I know exactly what I'm ending. She pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the chapel, clear, unmistakable. Your father walked away when things got ugly, the recording said. Men like him pretend that makes them clean. But silence does damage too. I felt like I'd been punched. The recording continued. This wedding fixes more than you realize. It closes loops. It puts me where I need to be. A woman sobbed somewhere behind me. Daniel's face drained of color. Elena stopped the recording. I didn't know at first why you needed this wedding to happen so badly, she said. Why you were always rushing. Why postponing was never an option. She looked at me again. Then I understood. She turned back to him. You didn't come for love, she said. You came for proximity. The word hung in the air like smoke. Elena took 1 step closer to the altar, but not toward Daniel. Toward the edge. Toward freedom. You thought marrying me would make you untouchable, she continued. Family. respectability, a clean ending to a dirty story. Daniel's voice dropped to a hiss. You think this makes you righteous? You're humiliating your father. She smiled sadly. No, she said. I'm trusting him. That cut deeper than any accusation. Because she was right. She was trusting me, to finally do what I hadn't done years ago. To stop calling silence complicated. The chapel was so quiet now I could hear my own breathing. Elena turned fully toward me. Dad, she said softly, there's more. And it's not just about him. My heart sank. Because if this wasn't the whole truth, then the worst was still coming. Ask yourself this. What if the lie you thought was buried wasn't finished with you yet? What if it had waited, patiently, for the moment you were most vulnerable? Because the next thing Elena revealed didn't just expose Daniel. It exposed the cost of the choice I'd made all those years ago. And it would force me to choose, publicly, between protecting my past or protecting my daughter. Elena's next words didn't come loudly. They came gently, which somehow made them far more dangerous. Dad, she said, turning to face me fully now, there's a reason he chose me. My pulse thundered in my ears. Daniel shook his head slowly, a warning. Elena, don't. She ignored him. There's a second investigation, she continued. One that never made the news. One that was buried because the people hurt by it couldn't afford lawyers, or time. I felt the blood drain from my face. Because I already knew what she was talking about. After I'd walked away from the firm, after the headlines faded, there had been a second incident. Smaller. Quieter. A subcontractor collapse. A man injured. A family paid off with just enough money to disappear. I had been asked to testify. I didn't. I told myself the first whistle was enough. That I had a child to raise. A wife already sick. A life already breaking. I chose silence again. Elena swallowed. The injured worker's daughter, she said, was my age. My knees nearly buckled. She grew up watching her father lose everything, Elena continued. His health. His job. His sense of worth. She grew up knowing the truth, and knowing no one cared. Daniel's voice cracked now. That has nothing to do with. It has everything to do with you, Elena snapped, her composure finally breaking for just a moment. Because you were the one who negotiated the payoff. You were the one who made sure the paperwork vanished. The room erupted in whispers. I stared at Daniel, seeing him clearly now, not as my daughter's fiancé, not as a polished professional, but as a man who had been cleaning up messes for powerful people his entire life. And when you found out my father was involved, Elena said, tears finally glistening in her eyes, you didn't come for revenge. She paused. You came for leverage. The word hit like a gunshot. You thought marrying me would keep him quiet, she said. Because what father would reopen old wounds if it meant destroying his daughter's happiness? Every eye was on me now. Not Daniel. Not Elena. Me. Daniel exhaled slowly, defeated but not apologetic. I wanted closure, he said. We all did what we had to do. I looked at my daughter. At the strength in her posture. At the courage in her voice. At the cost she was willing to pay to stop a cycle I had helped continue. I found the other family, Elena said softly. I met her. A hush fell. She didn't want revenge, Elena continued. She wanted acknowledgement. She wanted someone to finally say, you mattered. Elena took a step toward me. I realized something then, she said. The truth doesn't just belong to the people who survive it. It belongs to the people who were hurt by it too. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was steady, unforgiving, and full of love. I love you, Dad, she said. But today, I need you to choose. The chapel felt like it was closing in. Choose. Protect the past, or protect the future. Daniel watched me carefully now, calculating again, waiting to see which version of me would show up. The man who stayed silent, or the father who finally spoke. Before I could answer, Elena turned back to the guests. I won't marry him, she said clearly. But this doesn't end here. She looked at Daniel one last time. And neither does the truth. My mouth opened, but no words came out. Because in that moment, I realized something devastating. This wasn't just my daughter exposing a lie. This was my daughter finishing a story I'd been too afraid to complete. And the cost of finishing it would change all of our lives forever. Let me ask you, right here, in the middle of this story, if telling the truth meant destroying the life you built, but saving the person you love most, what would you do? Because the next choice I made didn't just decide the fate of a wedding. It decided whether my daughter would ever look at me the same way again. I opened my mouth and closed it again. Because courage doesn't always arrive on command. Sometimes it has to be dragged out of the wreckage of regret. The chapel waited. Elena waited. Daniel waited too, his expression carefully neutral now, like a man confident the past would protect him the way it always had. I felt 30 years collapse into that silence. 30 years of justifying quiet decisions. 30 years of telling myself someone else will speak up. 30 years of believing survival was the same thing as integrity. Elena, I said finally, my voice hoarse. She squeezed my hand once. Not encouragement. Permission. I turned to Daniel. I knew, I said. Not everything. But enough. The words tasted like rust. A wave of murmurs rolled through the guests. My brother stared at me in disbelief. My sister covered her mouth. Daniel's eyes sharpened. Careful, he said softly. You don't want to make this worse than it already is. Worse. I almost laughed. I was asked to testify, I continued, my voice shaking now. After the second incident. I was tired. Scared. My wife was dying. My daughter was 10 years old. I swallowed hard. So I signed the papers. I stayed quiet. Elena closed her eyes. Not in anger. In grief. That silence, I said, protected people who didn't deserve it. The chapel felt heavier with every word. Daniel stepped forward. This is pointless, he said. Statutes have expired. Records are gone. You'll only ruin your reputation, and hers. He gestured at Elena. Think about her future. Something inside me broke then. Cleanly. Finally. I said. Daniel scoffed. You think this ends with a confession and applause? You'll lose everything. He was right. I saw it clearly now. My savings. My name. My standing. The fragile peace I'd built after my wife's death. And for a terrifying moment, the old instinct surged back. Protect what you have left. I looked at Elena. She was crying silently now. Not because she was afraid, but because she already knew the cost of truth. And she was willing to pay it, even if I wasn't. That realization crushed me. This was her dark night. But it was mine too. Daniel leaned in, his voice low, venomous. Walk away, he said. Let this be messy but forgettable. I will disappear. You can still have your life. I almost believed him. That was the worst part. The lie sounded like relief. Elena let go of my hand. That hurt more than anything else. She stepped back, standing alone at the front of the chapel in her wedding dress, abandoned by the future she'd planned and the past she'd exposed. I understand if you can't, she said quietly, not looking at me. I just needed you to know why I did. That was it. That was rock bottom. The moment where love risks turning into distance forever. I felt something tear open inside my chest. I realized then that silence had already cost me enough. It had cost other families their justice. It had almost cost me my daughter. And it would cost me her respect if I chose it again. I took a step forward. Then another. My knees trembled. But I didn't stop. Because the darkest nights don't end on their own. They end when someone finally stands up in the dark. And in that moment, shaking, exposed, terrified, I understood something with painful clarity. If I walked away now, I would lose her anyway. The room held its breath. And so did I. Because the next words out of my mouth would either finish breaking my daughter's heart, or begin to heal something that had been broken for decades. Tell me to continue when you're ready. I reached into my jacket pocket. Not for a phone. Not for notes. For something I hadn't touched in years. A folded, yellowed envelope. Daniel's eyes flicked to it, sharp with sudden unease. I kept copies, I said quietly. Not because I was brave. Because I was afraid. I unfolded the papers with hands that still trembled, but no longer hesitated. Emails. Site reports. Names. I continued. I told myself I was holding on to them just in case. But the truth is, I was waiting for a reason to stop hiding. Elena looked at me now, really looked at me. Hope and pain collided in her eyes. This, I said, holding the papers up, is that reason. Daniel shook his head. Those documents won't mean anything without context. They'll mean everything with testimony, I replied. The words surprised even me. Testimony. Out loud. Public. Final. A strange calm settled over me then. Not relief, but alignment. The feeling of two parts of yourself finally agreeing. I turned to Elena. I failed you once, I said. By teaching courage and not living it. I won't do that again. Her lips parted slightly. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. I turned to the guests. To everyone here, I said, voice steady now, this isn't how a wedding should go. But it is how truth sometimes arrives, uninvited and overdue. Daniel backed away slowly. You're making a mistake, he said. You think this makes you a hero. No, I replied. It makes me accountable. He laughed bitterly. You'll destroy her name too. I looked at my daughter. She already chose her name, I said. It's honesty. Something shifted in the room. The whispers changed tone, not curiosity now, but recognition. The sound people make when they realize they're witnessing something rare and irreversible. Elena stepped forward again. Dad, she said softly, are you sure? I met her gaze. For the first time in a long time, I said, yes. She nodded. A single tear slipped down her cheek. Then she smiled. Not the polite smile from photos. The real one. The one she used to give me after she fell off a bike and stood back up. I turned to Daniel one last time. This ends today, I said. Not with a wedding. With the truth. Security had arrived quietly at the back of the chapel. Someone had already made a call. Daniel looked around, finally understanding that the ground beneath him had given way. This isn't over, he muttered. I shook my head. No, I said. It finally is. Elena took a deep breath and turned to the priest. I won't be marrying him, she said clearly. But I am walking away with my father. The priest nodded slowly, solemnly. Then, he said, this ceremony is concluded. But something else had begun. As Elena slipped her arm through mine, the weight in my chest lifted, not because the consequences disappeared, but because the truth no longer belonged to the shadows. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Redemption doesn't arrive when the damage is undone. It arrives when someone finally stops running from it. If you've ever waited for the right moment to do the right thing, pause here and ask yourself, what if the moment you're waiting for is already here? Because what happened after we walked out of that chapel didn't just change our names in public records. It changed the way my daughter and I saw each other forever. Tell me to continue when you're ready for the final act. The chapel doors swung open. Sunlight poured in like a spotlight, illuminating the faces of every guest. Cameras clicked, murmurs rippled, but I didn't see them. I saw only Elena and the papers in my hands. Daniel's eyes darted from me to Elena, realizing fully that every move he had calculated had failed. No wedding. No public approval. Only exposure. Elena, he said, voice low and dangerous. This isn't over. You have no idea what you're doing, what you're about to start. I do, she said, steady, fearless. And for the first time, I'm not afraid of it. I stepped closer to her, holding the yellowed envelope. Let's finish this, I said quietly. Together. I began reading aloud, in front of everyone, the documents I had carried for years, emails, project records, hidden payments, the names of those who were hurt, and the evidence of Daniel's true identity and involvement. Gasps echoed. Faces turned pale. Daniel's smile vanished entirely. He tried to interject. You can't, this isn't legal, he shouted. It's called truth, I replied firmly. And you can't erase it. He lunged toward the altar, desperation in every step. But the groomsmen intercepted him. He struggled, glaring at me and Elena, but the crowd's tension was electric, everyone aware they were witnessing a reckoning. Elena stepped forward, holding her phone. "I have recordings," she said, voice echoing through the chapel. "All conversations. Everything he tried to hide. The world will know who you really are." Daniel froze. I could see the realization hit. The lies, the manipulation, the years of hidden agendas, they were all collapsing. Then, Elena looked at me. "Dad, I want you to finish this." I inhaled deeply, the weight of decades pressing down. But in that instant, something inside me snapped free, the fear, the guilt, the hesitation. I spoke with the authority of every father who had protected, every man who had survived, every person who had been silent for too long. "Everyone here deserves to know the truth," I said. "And if it destroys our reputations or upends plans, so be it. Justice is more important than comfort. And my daughter's future is worth more than anything else." The room held its breath. Then, with every eye on him, I exposed the full story. Daniel's real identity, his connection to the collapsed firm, the lives affected, the secret motivations behind his marriage plan. I read aloud names, dates, proof, unshakable evidence. Daniel crumpled, realizing the game was over. He turned to leave, escorted firmly by security, his presence now hollow. The tension in the room dissolved into an almost sacred silence. Elena turned to me, tears glistening, and whispered, "Thank you, Dad, for believing me, for standing with me." I wrapped my arms around her, feeling the weight of the past finally lift. We didn't need the wedding to validate us. We didn't need a perfect ceremony. We only needed courage and truth, and now we had both. In that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully understood in years. Bravery isn't about doing the easy thing. Bravery is choosing the hard right over the comfortable wrong. And today, Elena had taught me that lesson anew. We walked out of the chapel together. Not as a bride and groom. Not as victim and manipulator. But as a father and daughter who had survived deceit, faced the shadows, and emerged stronger, closer, and unbroken. If you were there, watching, you would have felt the weight of every life affected. And I wonder, what would you do if the person you trusted most handed you a truth that could destroy everything you thought you knew? Because courage, love, and truth don't just exist in fairy tales. They exist in moments like this. Ask yourself, would you have the strength to stand up even when it seemed impossible? Let me know your thoughts in the comment. And with that, the final act of courage was complete. The chapel doors closed behind us, and for a moment, the world outside seemed impossibly bright. Sunlight caught the edges of Elena's veil, and I realized something. We had walked through fire and come out whole. Not untouched, not unscarred, but whole. We stepped into the quiet of the garden. Guests lingered, some staring, some whispering, but no one interrupted. The tension had lifted. What remained was respect, respect for truth, courage, and the bond between a father and his daughter. Elena turned to me, her eyes soft now, free from fear. "Dad," she said, taking both my hands in hers, "I couldn't have done this without you. Not just today, but ever. You taught me courage. Today, I finally lived it." I swallowed hard. "No," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You taught me. You reminded me that silence isn't strength. Standing up is." We laughed softly, a sound that carried years of grief, worry, and unspoken love. It was a release, the kind that only comes after a storm passes. Over the next few days, the aftermath unfolded. Daniel's schemes were exposed. Legal authorities began inquiries into the firm's hidden deals. Some of the injured parties finally received acknowledgement, even justice. Not everything could be fixed, but enough. Enough to see that honesty had weight, power, and healing. Elena and I spent the evening after the chapel walking along the beach near our family home. The waves crashed gently, their rhythm steady and comforting. She looked at me and smiled, the same way she had on the morning she learned to ride her bike without training wheels. "I feel free," she said. "You earned that," I replied. "Not just me," she said softly. "Both of us." I nodded. She was right. In choosing truth over comfort, in facing danger and uncertainty, we had reclaimed more than a wedding day. We had reclaimed our bond, our integrity, and our courage. That night, I sat with her, and we read the letters she had written, not just the one in the chapel, but all the unsent words she had carried for weeks. Each line revealed thoughtfulness, strength, and wisdom beyond her years. It struck me then that parenting isn't just about teaching courage. Sometimes, it's about standing beside your child when they show you how it's really done. Weeks later, Elena began a new chapter. Not as a bride in a manipulated union, but as a woman unafraid to demand honesty in every relationship. She reconnected with old friends, met new mentors, and even reconciled with those who had been wronged in the past, offering forgiveness where it was possible and strength where it wasn't. I watched her grow with pride that felt too big for words. And I understood something fundamental. Life would always present challenges, lies, and betrayals. But when love, truth, and courage meet, the outcome can be transformative. As the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in gold and crimson, Elena took my hand. "Thank you," she said. "For everything. For always being on my side, even when I didn't know how much I needed you." I smiled, feeling the quiet joy of victory and redemption. "Always," I said. And together, we walked forward, free from the shadows of the past, stronger than ever, bound not by ceremonies or obligations, but by love, trust, and the courage to face the truth, no matter how impossible it seemed. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.